Chapter 33 Nursing His Mother. In a year and a half, Jiro advanced to the 6th grade of his school. At the beginning of the academic year, a special class was opened to meet the needs of those who would take the examination for the middle school. Jiro also joined it. On his way to school and back home, Jiro talked with Yuichi and other friends about their dreams for the future. As they walked across the fields of wheat, they heard larks chirping noisily in the sky. The bad feeling between Jiro and Kenzo was dissolving little by little. He sometimes called him uncle, but could not go back to that innocent world he had enjoyed before. On the other hand, the coldness between them could not escape the notice of the Masakis and Onobu. The dark mood between them was growing thinner, but it was gradually filtering through the whole family of Masakis. Everyone knew that Jiro would leave the Masakis in a year or so. 1 year's perseverance and all would be over. Kenzo admitted it because of his sense of obligation to his parents-in-law, and so did Onobu on account of her sister. The Masakis decided to endure it because of their love of Jiro and for the honor of Shunsuke, the boy's father who went bankrupt. The old Masakis were patient, but at the same time wished they could reform the boy's character so that they would be thanked not only by Kenzo but also by Jiro's parents. In the meantime, Jiro grew conscious of his situation. By and by, he distinguished his own family from his relatives. He could not help thinking of what kind of situation he was in. Seikichi was born at the Masakis, but he was not. Seikichi could eat proudly, but he was not allowed to do so. Jiro became more watchful and prudent in everything he did. His awkward feeling had been directed only to Kenzo, but now it was turned to the other members too. He tried not to bother even his grandparents. When the employees made fun of him or asked him to do something, he felt as if he were insulted. He could no longer talk back to them as freely as he had done before. What made him feel uneasy was his grandparents' recent attitude to him. It seemed to him that they were hiding something from him. They often went to the Hondas, but he was always left behind. When they came back, they did not like to tell him about their visit. Grandfather Masaki said to him, "If you have time to go to the city, you should spend it studying hard there. Don't forget you'll enter the middle school next year." Grandmother said, "I heard that Kyoichi got into the 2nd grade with honorable marks. Their words only helped to make him more doubtful of them. He suspected that a secret plan might be being arranged between the Hondas and the Masakis. His feeling of solitude since his boyhood grew stronger as time went by. Summer was drawing near. One day, Jiro came back from school and was about to go upstairs to the children's room when he heard his father's voice in the drawing room. He stopped and turned in that direction. The Masakis, Kenzo, Onobu, and his father were sitting with a serious look. They stopped talking and turned to Jiro. All the faces looked stiff like stone. Even Shunsuke, whom he had not seen for a long time, did not talk to him. Not knowing what to do, Jiro was standing at the base of the stairs. He felt that they were waiting for him to go upstairs, so he left there in anxiety. Sitting at the desk, he opened his textbooks, unusual for him these days, but of course was not in the mood to do his homework. As he gazed at the textbook vacantly, he was all ears to the voices downstairs. Their voices could not be heard at all. While in his usual mood, he would immediately go downstairs by the tree at the eaves and overhear what they were talking about. Strangely, his limbs were paralyzed and he could not stir an inch from his desk. He remained at the desk for an hour or so. Out of the window was seen the bitter orange tree, which had overgrown the eaves. A number of bees were sipping honey from its white blossoms, and some petals whirled down, dancing in the wind. Jiro was watching the scene absent-mindedly. Suddenly, he was called by Onobu downstairs. "Hi, Jiro-chan, are you doing your homework?" she said, but he did not respond. He took out a pencil from the case and began to sharpen it with a knife. "Aren't you up there, Jiro-chan?" she said, and went downstairs. Jiro hastily stood up with his pencil and a knife in his hand. "What's the matter?" she said. "You didn't answer, did you? You're wanted by your father." Jiro went down after Onobu, very strained, but Kenzo was not seen there. Shunsuke and Masaki were sitting with a serious look as before. Bowing to his father, Jiro sat down clumsily and looked up at them, but soon hung his head. Shunsuke looked into his face intently and said in an unusually sober tone, "You'll have to do your duty by your mother, Jiro." He could not make a quick reply to these unexpected words, but sensed that something important would be told to him. He felt very tense. "Mother will be here in a few days," said Shunsuke, but he could not understand what it meant to him. His father's words were quite different from what he had expected. In fact, he was afraid that his father might mention Kenzo. Feeling a little relieved, he looked up at his father. "I didn't tell you, but your mother has been ill," he said in a weak voice. Shunsuke tried to continue his words, but sank into silence. In place of his father, Grandmother Masaki explained the rest of the whole story. According to her, Otami had been suffering from tuberculosis. Her condition would become worse in that gloomy house in the city, so the Masakis proposed to take her in for her health. She did not mention at all the fact that Shunsuke was in poverty. Nor did she say anything about how Otami was treated by Grandmother Honda. But Jiro could imagine the situation to some extent. "So your mother is coming here soon," said Shunsuke. "I thought I'd better take you back today because I'll have to trust my wife here. But Grandfather Masaki said that now is the time for you to serve your mother as a good boy. He suggested that you should stay here till you graduate from the primary school next spring. Do you think you can be a good boy for your sick mother, Jiro?" Before thinking about how to nurse Otami, Jiro thought of that gloomy house and pictured himself being treated cruelly by his grandmother again, which was enough to make him give up returning home. The existence of Kenzo flashed in his mind, but he soon concluded that he could stay at the Masakis with a good reason, now that he was trusted with nursing his sick mother. "Yes, father," he said a little heroically. "I think I can be a good boy." "That's good. Then tell me what you will do to take care of your mother," said Shunsuke. "I know how to nurse her. It's simple." "Really? How can you do it, Shiro?" "I pour medicine into mother's cup, rub her back, and so on, father." "Is that all?" "Sometimes I'll have to put an ice bag on her head to cool her." "Nothing more?" "Of course there'll be a lot more to do, father," said Jiro. "What do you mean by a lot more to do?" Jiro was a little offended with his father's sarcastic questions and looked away, not answering him any more. Shunsuke was watching him for a while. Then he said in a little pressing tone, "I'm afraid you can't be trusted with your mother. It was very kind of grandfather to allow you to stay here with her, but how about going back with me?" Jiro turned to his father in confusion, then to grandfather Masaki, but they were looking at him with a sober face. Quite embarrassed, he turned to grandmother Masaki and to Onobu, but they were sitting there with tightly closed mouths. What an unusual situation it was for Jiro. Wasn't it always Shunsuke or grandfather Masaki who backed him when he was in trouble? Onobu must also have been his ally, though she was not able to support him very openly because of her husband. But now all of them were gazing at him with cold eyes as if by agreement. It was very unusual, he said to himself. He had never been in such a serious situation. He didn't know what he should do. He was a genius to find his way out in a terrible pinch, but it was the end of the world that day. Being stared at silently by the people he had believed to be his friends, he felt absolutely helpless. It was a real dead end Jiro had experienced for the first time in his life. He felt as though he was pushed into a box or something. He was bitterly vexed and at the same time felt very unseen, horrible object surging toward him like a gigantic column of clouds. He could not resist or react to them cynically as he used to. There was no chance of fleeing from them either. He had no other alternative than crying out. Tears work as a key to solving a difficult problem in most cases. His tears at the last resort also helped him out of it because the adults were moved by his tears. Probably they were waiting for them. "You don't have to cry, dear," said grandmother Masaki. "You can stay here if you wish, Jiro," said grandfather, "but you must be a bit more obedient. Your father is also worried about you." It seemed that he was preaching, and at the same time consoling him. The old man's words made him think of Kenzo. He understood why he was not present there. But why didn't they tell him directly to behave well to him? Why did his father tell him so ironically under the pretext of nursing his mother? The little boy couldn't understand why they were beating around the bush like that, trying to guess in tears what they really meant. "Grandfather's right," said Shunsuke. "You're already in the 6th grade, the graduating class. You ought to know how to behave in the world. You mustn't be sulky at a trifling thing and worry your grandparents. If your mother comes, your uncle and aunt will really have a lot of trouble for her. They'll have to look after your sick mother. If you behave so peevishly towards them, how can I apologize to them? Your mother won't be able to feel at ease either. You said nursing your mother is quite simple, didn't you? But the most important thing is that you don't worry your mother. The doctor also said that peace of mind works best for her illness. So if you want to stay here, you must be obedient to them. Also, you must study hard and come home as soon as school is over. Then take care of your mother as you told me just a minute ago. Do you understand?" Jiro had never been given such a severe and lengthy lesson by Shunsuke, contrary to his usual carefree attitude. It made the boy sense that his father was speaking to him in deep sorrow. He was still weeping, but his tears were no longer without a cause. As he wept, he thought of the situation his father was in and his position at the Masakis too. He felt something heavy hanging down on him. "I was wrong, father," said Jiro between his sobs, apologizing to him with a pure heart. It was the exposure of his true sentiment backed up by his reason and will. He was no longer the naughty boy that he used to be. He was certainly breaking himself of his selfish ways to go through the complex world with the power of will. He was thinking of his relation to those around him in earnest.